We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back on Liberty Nation Radio, joined by a long-time host of this here show and Liberty Nation senior political analyst, Mr. Tim Donner. Earlier in the show, we were talking the cost of an election and what a president with a phone and a pen can do to bolster his chances of re-election. But now I want to move on to something that really is very much in the news this week. And these are the cases against another president, a former president, Donald Trump. And it seems to me, Tim, that this whole 4 indictments, 91 felony charges, Trump's going to prison, all of the Twitterverse, sorry, Xverse, I guess it's now called, alight with, we've got him this time. It seems to just be crumbling, doesn't it? Like a poorly made house of cards.
I'd say that's a good description, because in each and every case brought against Trump this year, 4 cases with a total of 91 felony charges. In each case, things are crumbling, though in different ways. The case in Georgia is crumbling because Fani Willis was obviously in an inappropriate relationship with the original prosecutor, and she has been stained, perhaps irreparably, and her case is consequently weakened. The federal prosecutor in the documents case has now postponed that trial, which means it's probably not going to be a factor in the election. And in New York, where Trump is forced to sit day after day and watch the proceedings, this week, when they brought in Stormy Daniels herself, and she provided all the lurid details of her likely one-night stand with Donald Trump. Of course, he denies everything, but when they did that, they, I think, poisoned the case, perhaps beyond repair. The defense for Donald Trump went for a mistrial, and I think if it wasn't Donald Trump, it might well have been granted because of the utterly gratuitous and irrelevant comments of Stormy Daniels. I mean, the prosecution is desperate because every single one of their own witnesses that they've called by subpoena or who came in by choice have weakened their case rather than strengthening it. So this whole lawfare project is falling apart. And it's not just that it has failed, but in fact, Mark, it's produced the opposite of the desired result, which is making Donald Trump something inconceivable, a subject of sympathy, a victim in the eyes of the American people. Everybody can see what's going on. Republicans, Democrats, independents. Yeah. They can all see what's going on. It has failed. And now pretty much all Joe Biden has left is to try and buy off various constituencies that are abandoning the Democrats in droves.
I think it was judging by the polling at the moment, the only thing that could really damage Donald Trump's re-election chances is Donald Trump. I think we've talked about this before. But before, it was these cases, they were talked about so seriously, but it's as you say, I mean, neither of us are lawyers, Tim, but it does seem, and if it seems this way to us, who are very keen analysts of politics, if it seems this way to us, it's got to be seeming at least somewhat similar to the voting public out there. And when you say fatally flawed, I think it even goes beyond that. It's almost kamikazely flawed, if I may use the term. So you had, as you just mentioned, Stormy Daniels describing every lurid act imaginable in a case that is about a misfiling of paperwork. Now, for those of you with memories longer than a couple of weeks, Harvey Weinstein, his conviction was overturned because during his trial, witnesses came forward and essentially assassinated his character, which I have no love for Harvey Weinstein. I don't know anything about him, but and began talking about lurid stories about him, and that
And
prejudiced the
that's
jury.
why
It
the
prejudiced the jury, and
and
therefore
that's
it was
why
overturned.
he was let go.
Yeah.
And it's a very good analogy, Mark, because we're looking at the same kind of situation. I mean, it's gotten so bad, it's backfired and boomeranged on the Biden administration so badly that, let me put it this way, if this was an ordinary election with ordinary candidates, not one who's borderline on compos mentis and another one who is the most bombastic and controversial figure of modern times, Donald Trump would likely be looking at a landslide victory here. When you consider that Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden on every single issue except abortion. Democracy is no longer an issue because look at what's happening on with campus unrest across the country. That is chaos of a kind that was not limited to 1 day and 2 hours like January 6th. And you look at the fact that blacks have given Trump twice the vote they gave him in 2020, according to polls. Young people who voted for Biden by over 40 points in 2020 now favor Donald Trump, and Hispanics are basically split 50-50 with a guy who most famously began his campaign by talking about Mexicans as rapists and all that stuff. So if it wasn't Donald Trump under all these indictments and the fact that it's Trump and there's so many people that just hate him so intensely and deeply and personally, this is a landslide election because of Joe Biden, if not because of Donald Trump. That doesn't mean it will be, but there's literally nothing except scaring people about abortion that Joe Biden has left in his cookie jar.
Well, we talked about Joe Biden's record earlier, and something that popped into my head were the two big pushes of the Biden presidency. Now, see if you can remember this far back. That when was the last time anybody on the left mentioned Build Back Better? It's been months, right?
The last time I saw it mentioned was in my own article on libertynation.com. And I had to look it up because I'd forgotten. Just kidding. But the point is, that was, of course, the big slogan in 2020. And the way that he was going to fulfill that promise was throwing $2 trillion at the American people, which ramped
and what did that result in, Tim?
Inflation and something that he won't be able to get out from under before the election. I think that his record on the economy, inflation, prices is so poor and so unpopular, it's hard to imagine, honestly, Joe Biden getting reelected on that alone, not to mention the border on fire and all of academia having all but surrendered to a radical mob.
Well, let's very briefly, let's bring up Joe Biden's other re-election plank that surpassed and supplanted Build Back Better, Bidenomics. When was the last time you heard that muttered?
Well, Mark, in fact, just like with the lawfare campaign against Trump, this has backfired and produced not just a failure, but the opposite of what was trying to be achieved. Bidenomics simply drew attention to the fact that everybody was unhappy with the Biden economy, and putting a face on it made it worse rather than better.
Tim Donner, thanks ever so much for being here.
Pleasure.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.